Hey guys, in this video we're going to be covering from about 400 BC to the 19th century. Don't worry, it's not going to take that long. We're not doing all of it, we're just doing major advances in the evolution of medicine. So, modern medicine has helped lead to a surge in the average life expectancy, which was approximately 36 in the late 1800s. Now we have humans living routinely into their early hundreds. That's almost 60 years. That's over 60 years. The advances in the medical science are to thank for this. Now, let's take a journey through the history of the medical advances. Let's start in 400 BC. Hippocrates, because I can't say his name apparently, Hippocrates used the term carcinos to describe tumors. Carcinos evolved into the word cancer. At this point in time, it is not yet known what causes cancer, but theories state that it's imbalance of the humors in the body. Hippocrates also describes measles, mumps, diphtheria, epidemic jaundice, and other conditions in his journals. Also, mental disorders are understood as diseases rather than symptoms of demonic possession or having signs of, or a sign of having displeased the god, which is good. It's very good. Okay, now moving on to AD. In the 2nd century, Galilean describes surgical treatments for breast cancer, which includes removing early-stage tumors, but the surgeries are brutal and often fatal. For centuries, unfortunately, these rudimentary surgeries are the only treatment for cancer. In 1100, the variolation technique is developed. This involved inoculating children and animals with dried scab material from smallpox patients. This is considered the first vaccine, and I'm going to be doing a vaccine video on a later date. In the 1400s, the first European establishment specifically for people with mental illness is established in Spain. In the 1500s, approximately 1540 AD, English barbers and surgeons performed tooth extractions and bloodletting. Now, to let you know, bloodletting is the withdrawal of blood from a patient to apparently cure or prevent an illness. This is based on the ancient system that stated that blood and other bodily functions are what are known as humors, and this was to maintain a healthy balance of them, though it doesn't really work because, yeah, we know that humors don't exist in this point in time. In the 1600s, the Europeans increasingly began to isolate the mentally ill. Unfortunately, they were often housed with the handicapped. Not saying that it was unfortunate they were housed with the handicapped, but they were also housed with criminals, which doesn't help people get better. Those considered insane are increasingly treated inhumanely, beaten, chained to walls, and kept in dungeons. In the late 1700s, after the French Revolution, French physician Philippe Finel, I hope I said that right, takes over the Becker Insane Asylum and forbids the use of chains and shackles. He removes patients from dungeons and provides them sunny rooms and allows them to exercise on the grounds. This does help with mental illness. It's proven that proper conditions actually does help. Yet, in other places, mistreatment persists. And it's going to persist. I think it's the 1950s when we finally see it slowly evening out. Okay. In 1789, Edwin Jenner publishes his work for the development of a vaccination that would protect against smallpox. He tests his theory by inoculating an 8-year-old boy named James Phillip with cowpox pustule liquid he recovered from the hands of a milkmaid, Sarah Nelms. This was done because they noticed that people who worked with cows, so a milkmaid, who got cowpox wasn't deadly in humans, but it protected them from getting smallpox because the structures were similar. Except cowpox didn't kill you. Okay, now we're moving on to the 1800s. For this video, it will be the last century that we cover, but there's a big chunk in the 1800s because that's when, the medical advances actually picked up. Okay, in 1818, human blood is transfused from one person to another for the first time. In 1814, U.S. reformer Dorothy Dix observed mentally ill people in Massachusetts, seeing men and women of all ages and saw incarcerated with criminals, left unclothed and in darkness, and unfortunately were forced to go without heat or bathrooms. In 1846, anesthesia becomes widely available. This helps expand the options for surgery. Among cancer patients, surgery is done to take tumors out of the body. Surgeons use this technique to remove a tumor from a patient's neck for the first time. In 1867, British surgeon Joseph Lister publishes the antiseptic principle in the practice of surgery, explaining the virtues of cleanliness during surgery. The mortality rate of surgical patients immediately falls. In 1881, Louis Pasteur and George Miller Steinberg almost simultaneously isolate and grow the pneumococcus organism in their labs. In 1883, mental illness is studied more scientifically for the first time. German psychiatrist Kaplan distinguishes mental disorders. Through subsequent research, we will disprove some of his findings, but his fundamental distinction between a manic-depressive psychosis and schizophrenia still holds to this day. In 1885, the first successful appendectomy is performed in Iowa. This, for people who do not know what it is, it's the removal of the nasty organ, the appendix. Now, we're going to move on to the last chapter for this video, and that's the late 1800s. The expectation in the United States is that hospitals for the mentally ill and humane treatment will cure the sick does not prove true. State mental hospitals become overcrowded and custodial care supersedes humane treatment. New York reporter Nellie Bly poses as a mentally ill person to become an inmate at an asylum. Her reports from inside then result in more funding to improve conditions. In 1889, William Hasted develops the radical mastectomy to treat breast cancer. The technique is used to use surgery to remove the tumor, breast, overlying skin, and muscle tissues. In 1890, chemical agents are found to minimize germs. Carbolic acid is then put on incision sites to minimize germs and therefore decrease infection rates. Lastly, in 1895, Wilhelm Conrad Anton, I can't pronounce his last name properly apparently because it's from Germany, invents the X-ray. Radiation therapy follows. Also, the first X-ray that was ever done is performed in Germany. Stay tuned for part 2, guys. Thank you.